Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and today I want to have a conversation about being human. And so, what might I mean by that? So, in this case, I'm talking about granting ourselves humanity. And so, whether that's through actually feeling our emotions or not denying or kind of like separating ourselves to an extent of where we are just not who we are entirely. So we're denying entire parts of ourselves in order to maintain some sort of persona or some sort of even like as a source of solitude. But I think that can be dangerous. And I'm going to talk about that using two pieces of art that came out relatively recently, actually. So the first piece of art that I'm going to be covering is the show Severance. But I'm only going to talk about season one. Well, I'm only going to reference season one. And there's a very particular scene that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about the premise of the show as well as the motivations behind one of our main characters. So if you would like to have a 100% spoiler free watch of this show, feel free to pause here, go watch the show. It is really, really good. I'd say even addicting almost. But yeah, pause here, go watch the show, and come back. But I promise I'm not giving away too much information that you do. A lot of the information you will get like first episode, and then the little scene that I want to highlight in particular comes down further along the line. But everything else will be absolutely brand new. I don't want to spoil anything too much. With that being said, if you would like to kind of just skip this part, I'm going to have on the screen the timestamp you should jump to if you would like to forego the entire description. Um, but yeah, so the show Severance, it's a thriller show that's on Apple TV. Um, and the season one came out in 2022, so like summer of 2022. And it's a really good show. It kind of follows this idea of an office in which like the work that they do, the the people they are inside of the office is completely severed from the versions of themselves outside of the office. So like who they are in the day to day, they have no idea what is going on when they are in the office because they kind of switch into this other version of themselves that remains in the office, and that version of themselves only exists in the office. So the people who work at this company only exist at work, while once they leave the office building, they become a whole different version, the other version of themselves. So it's like they exist almost in two different parts. And like the terms like that in which they refer to each other. So like the any is like the part of the person that works that's in the building, and the outie is the one that kind of goes out and lives the life. And yeah, so that's pretty much the entire premise of the show. Now, the motivation for one of the characters to complete this procedure, because it's a procedure they have to do in order to be severed, to have this kind of dual living type thing in the show, the the main character Mark, he did it because he did it almost as a way to alleviate some grief that he's going through at the moment. And he thought that would be the best way to alleviate that pain by splitting himself so that like a part of him doesn't have to feel the pain of grieving for at least 8 hours a day, 5 days out the week. So he wanted some type of solace away from grieving. And so he thought that getting that procedure and working at this job would be a way for him to do that. Now, the very specific scene that I kind of want to talk about refers to one of the new characters that we're kind of introduced to also in the first episode, I believe. Yeah, also kind of introduced to, in which um her her name's Helly. And so Helly R has her outie. There's a scene where Helly is trying to escape essentially, and she keeps trying to beg her outie to let her out and to like because she doesn't want to be working at this job. And there's a scene where Helly's outie talking to like there's a recorded video of Helly's outie talking to Helly's Innie, and she says, "You are not a person." And then like she says some other things, but if you want to watch the show, I don't want to spoil too much. But yeah, she says to her any like this inner version of herself, she says, "You are not a person." Like using those exact words. You are not a person. And so that is going to be something I want to highlight very specifically in today's conversation. Now, there's another piece of art that I want to reference that I feel like also kind of can help with this type of conversation. And I'm going to talk about that next. So, in this next piece of art, it is the movie Sing Sing with Cole Domingo, I believe. Great actor. I love his work. But this movie was released statewide about summer 2024. So this movie is also really, really recent. So I'm not going to spoil it too much because it's so recent, I know that it's far less likely that everyone might have gotten the chance to see it. I do highly recommend it. It's a really beautiful film to me. I honestly I plan to watch it again because I kind of want to see if I can take in more. But it's a great movie, and in this movie, it's sort of so if you want a spoiler free watch, pause here, go watch it, come back. It's less than 2 hours. Like there's not a lot of movies doing that nowadays, so it's like an hour 40 minutes, but still like it's less than 2 hours, so that's good. But yeah, so if you want a 100% spoiler free watch, go ahead, pause, watch, come back. But I'm not gonna detail so much that you don't you get kind of a terrible like you don't get to experience anything new when watching it if that's the case. So in this movie, we have our character Divine G, who's the main character. But he's actually not who we're going to be talking about. But for the most part, it follows him specifically in prison, and he's a part of this theater program that's used to rehabilitate inmates. And um, stuff happens. It's kind of like just the movie synopsis, essentially. But yeah, you experience a lot through that. So that's kind of the premise. The person I kind of want to focus on personally is Divine Eye. So Divine Eye is a gentleman who joins this theater rehabilitation program, but in so many different scenes, you can kind of see him like he's withholding himself, despite him having the desire in the first place to want to participate in this program, to want to be a part of this theater thing. You see him in several different instances, sort of like withholding and kind of like denying himself or not allowing himself the full capacity to participate and to be free in a way that would allow him to um, do exactly what it is that like kind of being the actor and doing the roles that is required of him would allow. And there's a very beautiful scene um, where one of the actors, also in the troupe, talks about how um, being a part of the theater program helped him to be human again. And I wanted to focus on that because in all of these instances, Divine Eye is sort of denying himself the ability to feel, the ability to express himself fully, and in doing so, also denying himself his own humanity. And so our conversation about that in particular can start in this next section. So something I think that's really important when it comes to being alive and being a person is not denying yourself any parts of not denying parts of you. I think I've mentioned this even in the previous episode that like it is important to feel the totality of your feelings and not be afraid of doing so, because in doing so you often are denying yourself your humanity. And so we see this in Sing Sing when Divine Eye is like he's not wanting to be vulnerable enough to express his emotions and to act fully in character because it would like it goes against how he was raised. It goes against the expectations of who he is. So in the movie, Divine Eye is a black man, and so men, especially, and also just black men in particular, um, experience the world a very specific way, and there are very specific expectations, and none of those expectations, even just in for manhood in general, is there an allowance for vulnerability in a sense. And you can kind of see Divine I struggle with this because being vulnerable and being a bit more theatrical is necessary when working in theater. um, there is an allowance of like embracing your entire self and allowing other people to be somewhat close to you that will be required to like kind of do this type of job. And you see Divine I sort of struggling with letting that be the case. Like there's a couple scenes where like you see him getting angry at people trying to get close to him because he's like, why are you doing this? Leave me alone type stuff. And it's it's hard to watch because he is denying himself this humanity. You can tell that he both wants this, but he's also fighting against this this notion or this pressure really to fully embrace and fully be who it is he wants to be in that moment, because to be who he is would be to go against everything he's been taught. And it's a struggle to see because like you can see that he's conflicted, you can see that he wants different, you can see that he wants more than what he allowing himself, and so he's denying himself his own humanity. And this is also prevalent in the show Severance, where Mark, our main character, is going to this job very specifically so that he can avoid feeling the very very difficult feelings that he's having to experience for at least up to 8 hours a day, 5 days out the week. He wants to not feel and not have to sit with those feelings. And in doing that, he is denying himself at least 40 hours of his life every single week that he just doesn't know about. And it's sort of unfortunate. I would say like it's sort of sad in watching him kind of transition into this severed self where he is just not allowing himself to feel those emotions, and he's not allowing himself to kind of sit with the feelings that what he should be feeling for the sake of being like just to avoid it altogether. And then of course the scene I mentioned earlier, the Audi referred to their innie, saying or told them like you are not a person. It's got to be frustrating because all of the innies, they have feelings and emotions, they have goals at least that they want to kind of meet, and um, they even kind of like dream and think a lot about what their lives look like on the outside. They wonder, they have all of these emotions, they have like they eat food, like they have all of the things that would make you a person, they are capable of doing. They're The only difference is they're not allowed to leave the building. And so they too are essentially imprisoned because Sing Sing happens in the prison. And then so these innies are essentially imprisoned because they are not allowed outside the building. Like their whole existence is to be in that building. And no matter how much they might want to not be in the building, the people who have the power to make it so that they're not there anymore are those on the outside. And those on the outside do not want that to be the case. And so it's kind of sad. Um, and then to have that person who you feel like you're supposed to be on the same page with, even though you feel human and you have all these desires, and especially a desire for freedom, to tell you you are not a person, it has to be really heartbreaking. You are denied your humanity by someone who is also supposed to be you, whether for whatever reason, whether it's because you are their solace when it comes to grief, or any of the other reasons that the people chose to kind of have this severed experience. And it's just, I feel as though it is really dangerous to get into the mindset of the best way to be myself, or the best way to be a version of who I am, is to deny myself parts of who I am. I know that it often seems like probably pretty normal in to say or do the things that go against the grain, or not necessarily that. What am I trying to say? It has become quite normalized for us to deny and ignore the parts of ourselves that want us, or that encourage us to compartmentalize all these parts of our lives. But that is simply not going to always be possible. It is important that we acknowledge the entirety of our personhood, the entirety of our being, because it's the entirety of our being that is sort of experiencing these things. And it is the entirety of our being that will be affected. When you deny these certain parts of yourself, you're not allowing for yourself, one, to feel the full totality of it, but you're also, in this compartmentalization, you're denying yourself the ability to even feel things, like to deny yourself the ability to even express and do as you would actually like to do. It's rather dangerous to do that sort of thing, in my opinion. And not even just in my opinion, but like very much so. I feel like we've gotten to a point in society and in life where we want to escape, and we want to not have to deal with the bad, and we want to not have to deal with the things that will make us struggle, or the things that will make it hard to live. But that's just not reality. There is no way to safely ignore entire parts of yourself and that not show up in other areas of your life. And that's just the end all be all. Because we see that happen in both movies as well. Well, in both the movie Thing and in the show Severance. And it's actually, I want you all to watch it, because I do think you will see for yourself how, in this compartmentalization, or in this desire to try to compartmentalize and deny themselves the full breadth of their own humanity, our characters sort of struggle. And like, you can see the struggle showing up in other areas. And that's kind of just how it always is. You kind of feel like think of it almost as like, like those volcanoes, where it's like with the vinegar and the baking soda mixture. It's almost like you're trying to, you say the bad thing is the vinegar. You're a volcano filled with baking soda, or is it baking powder? It's one of those two. And the bad thing happens, and or the emotion that you feel like you're not supposed to be feeling happens, and that's the vinegar being poured in. And so what you're doing, you're trying to cover the top and hold it down so that nothing happens. The problem is, you are not stopping that chemical reaction from happening. It is simply going to find any other avenue to escape. You think that, like, by pushing things down, that you're going to alleviate any of those emotions that you were supposed to be feeling, alleviate any of that, alleviate any of those things, and that you're going to be fine. But those things are still happening. Those feelings are still happening. They're just going to show up in another way. And it's not always going to be positive. It's not going to be done in a way that would allow for you to safely and healthily sort of take care of these things. And so I personally, I want to encourage you to embrace all of yourself and to not deny yourself your total and full humanity, because you have the capacity to be a human. All humans feel, all humans express, and having emotions are not dangerous in and of itself. It is more so what you do with those emotions. And so maybe that'll be another episode. Maybe I'll talk about um, like dealing with specific emotions, because there's a lot of emotions I feel that people kind of tell us are scary and or like tell us we're not supposed to feel, but those are just things that we feel, and they exist for a reason. It's about knowing how to mitigate and navigate having those specific feelings and knowing how to proceed forward from having those specific feelings that will kind of help with the future things in that case. And so, yeah, maybe it is going to be, not even maybe, it will be okay to feel all of your feelings. And so, maybe embracing the full capacity of your personhood and embracing all of who you are, your all of who you are too can be an art like everything else. Last and certainly not least is the awe moment. So for this week's awe moment, I'm going to be talking about the movie Inside Out. So I feel like this is a really good awe moment, especially for this particular episode, because if you remember or if you've not seen the movie, we kind of see Joy, who is the main character of the first movie, struggling with she's an emotion inside of a kid's head. She's struggling with allowing for this new emotion to kind of be present as well in the kid's head. And so like there's some shenanigans that kind of take a foot in. I don't want to spoil too much in case you haven't seen it and you still want to see it. But like yeah, in this movie, we see Joy kind of struggling with a new emotion that's not exactly positive, existing in the same brain alongside her and all of the other emotions that are kind of present. And so this is kind of, I feel like this movie is a really good lesson in embracing all of you, because at least in this instance all of these emotions, all of that exist in Riley's brain are her, but we see some of the emotions trying to avoid these other emotions existing and occurring, and it is somewhat um and it's really affecting Riley and how she engages and acts in the real world. And honestly, that's kind of exactly what I was talking about earlier, and like how it shows up in your own life when you're trying to avoid very specific emotions. It shows up in other areas of your life, kind of whether you want it to or not. And so, yeah, it's kind of, I do think it's really important to embrace all of your personhood, and that is why I think this movie for the all moment is also really poignant, and it definitely kind of like is what came to mind while I was working on this episode. So yeah, if you have any comments you'd like to drop them in the comments below. I'm also going to do a new thing. I'm going to have some questions on the screen that I'd like for you to answer in the comments if you have the time. So feel free to do just that. So I realize that there's a very good possibility that some of you are only listening to the podcast. So I'm going to read the questions aloud as well. First question: what is the biggest appeal of denying our own humanity? Second question: do you think there is a way to appeal to embracing our full humanity? Third question: what's a piece of art that you feel reflects this same sentiment? Now feel free to answer all of the questions, one of the questions, or maybe even ask a question of your own, and let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, also follow me on all social medias. Also subscribe to the YouTube. Um, follow the follow the podcast, and yeah, I think that's everything. Um, yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for keep being lovely. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.